Good morning, good afternoon, good evening everyone, and welcome to this very special GitLab live event. My name is Jono Bacon and I'm going to be emceeing the proceedings today. First of all, I just want to say a big thank you to Platzi who have helped to make this happen. If you could see the amount of equipment behind the camera now, you'll be blown away. So big thank you to Platzi at platzi.com for putting this together. I'm joined by some phenomenal guests today. So first of all, we're going to have Vili Ichev, who is a partner at August Capital. We're going to have Sijbrandij, who is CEO and co-founder and king of the world at GitLab. We've got Ashley Smith, who is Chief Marketing Officer at GitLab, and Joop van der Voort, who is the VP of Product at GitLab as well. Now, before I get into the proceedings, I just want to talk a little bit about why I think what you're about to watch today is important, not just for GitLab, but also for open source and for software and hardware innovation in general. Throughout the course of my personal career, I've had one very singular focus in life, and that is to understand every nuance and detail about how we build powerful, productive, and effective communities. I spent some time working as Director of Community at Canonical, at GitHub, at XPRIZE, and now I work as a consultant helping companies around the world to build communities. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that building communities is really difficult, and that's because there's this really complicated patchwork of pieces that need to fit together that ultimately start with an idea that lives in somebody's head and then transitions through to something will eventually be on somebody's screen. And that patchwork has got a complicated set of components that need to be glued together in different ways. And if we don't glue those pieces together in different ways, it causes complexity. So these components include things such as idea management, like how do you get the best ideas to float to the surface? Not every idea is a good idea, despite what people may think. How do we communicate effectively? Batch, real-time, video, audio. How do we host code effectively and manage that code? How do we do effective code review and collaboration around that code review? This is arguably one of the most important parts of the software development lifecycle. How do we do build management, continuous integration, continuous deployment, containerization and deployment? QA, whether it's automated or manual QA, all of these different pieces are important, and if you don't glue those pieces together right, it causes that frustration, that annoyance and that bureaucracy. And part of the reason why it causes that frustration is because underneath all of this are a complex set of human dynamics, often known as behavioral economics. We often forget that we're animals. When you take away the million cameras in this room, the screens, the mobile phones, the cars, everything else, we have a consistent set of ambitions, fears, insecurities, quirks, and such. And these human dynamics are fundamentally irrational, but they're irrational in very predictable ways. And when we understand those predictable behavioral economics, and we use those to influence the pieces of that patchwork, our code hosting, our communication, all of those different pieces, we build systems that are not just more human, but are more humane as well. But sitting on top of that are also some other things that we need to consider as well. How do we pull people in to consume that system, those processes and that collaboration? It involves things such as leadership. How do you help people to be the best that they can be? How do you do effective software development in an organization, in an open source community and such? How do you do effective outreach across podcasting, social media, blogging, events, hackathons? How do you incentivize people? And incentives have the connective tissue of rewards as well. Not just extrinsic rewards, such as swag, everyone loves that, but the intrinsic rewards, such as feeling part of a project and feeling appreciated for what you're doing. And then engagement. The way in which you engage people at the beginning of your community, when people join your company or people join your community, is very different to the way in which you engage people who have been around for a while, who are leading. And we need to approach that with nuance as well. And then growth. How do we build growth and get people involved and get people excited so they can have both significant and sustained contributions? As you can see, this is really hard. It's complicated. And if you look at most platforms today, whether it's code hosting platforms, product management platforms, project management platforms, they don't really help you to put these pieces together. And most developers, their expertise is focused on writing great code and building great projects, not necessarily how to glue bits of community management and collaboration infrastructure together. So this is something I've been personally beating the drum about for many years, and with various companies that I've worked with and companies that I've worked with and companies that I've consulted with. And a few weeks ago, I started doing some work with GitLab, and I was on a call with Ashley and Sid, and was basically talking about this. And this is when Sid shared the vision for conversational development, which is essentially putting this in place. It's essentially gluing all the right bits of the software development lifecycle in the right order, taking into account those human dynamics and making it approachable and accessible by everybody. So this is the reason why I'm really excited about what you're about to hear today. So let's talk about what we're going to see in these proceedings. First of all, I'm going to hand over to Sid in a second, and he's going to walk through the GitLab Master Plan and share some interesting and exciting news, but also talk in more detail about conversational development and what this means. Now, I'm pretty sure that most of you who are watching this are software people, and therefore software people don't like looking at slides, we like looking at demos. So you're going to see a demo video of some of this in action. Not all of it's quite finished, but you'll get a sense of how it's looking. And then we're going to get over to a panel, and I'm going to basically pierce all of these people's brains with questions that hopefully get to the heart of what you're interested in. But if my questions aren't good enough, we're then going to hand over to a live Q&A where you can ask your questions. And these are big people, so ask them some tough questions. Let's make it interesting. If you want to ask your questions, be sure to send out a tweet to #GitLab Live, okay? You'll see it in the corner of the slides. That's how you get your questions. Go and stick your questions on Twitter. Start right now. Ask questions about the things that you're seeing. They're going to appear on a little iPad here that is being run by the perfect Kirsten Abmer. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sid, the CEO and co-founder of GitLab.
Thank you, Jono, for that introduction. We're all super excited to share what we've been up to and where we're going. And I'm here today to announce some great news and talk about the future of GitLab. So before we dive into our master plan for the future, let's talk about where we've been. In 2011, Dimitri and Valeri created GitLab after being unsatisfied with the current solutions on the market. They were living in the Ukraine at the time and working for a large consultancy, and they needed a better way to use Git. So they started working on GitLab, and quickly hundreds of developers started contributing to it. GitLab was built for developers by developers. And over time, the open source project grew into an open core business. So we started in 2011 as an open source project. And I saw GitLab in 2012, and I did a show Hacker News where I asked whether people wanted to use GitLab as a service, gitlab.com. People liked it. So I sent an email to Dimitri. Dimitri, I'm going to try to monetize this thing, and you won't be getting anything. And he responded, that's awesome that you're trying to make GitLab more popular, and it's open source, so do what you want. I'm grateful. A year later, I figured out that I was wrong. It was very hard to monetize SaaS. It was very hard to make money with our .com. But at the same time, I had all these large organizations, the biggest organizations in the world, running GitLab internally behind the firewall and asking for more features. So at that time, Dimitri tweeted publicly that he wanted to work on GitLab full-time. And that was amazing because I could hire Dimitri. So we emailed, I went over to the local Western Union office and I wired Dimitri his first monthly payment. And I vividly remember the person behind the counter asking, do you know this person? Or is this someone you met over the internet? Because there was a lot of fraud ongoing from the Ukraine at the time. And I think that's where we really started as a remote company, because straight-faced I said, I know this person. And that allowed me to send him the first payment. And this thing was a success. We put some features in Enterprise Edition, and from that revenue, we were able to incorporate GitLab. However, the next year, in 2014, near the end of the year, we had our first customer cancel. And we were like, what happened? What's wrong with GitLab? What can we improve? And they said, we love it. We built a great game and we love GitLab. We want to continue using it. But the top of the company has decided to consolidate on an alternative. And then it hit us. Every organization in the world is going to probably use one tool to do inner sourcing. And we want that to be GitLab. So we applied to Y Combinator and were accepted into their batch in 2015, in the winter batch. We graduated in March of that year. At that time, we were 9 people. We quickly raised an A round that helped us scale the company faster. And in May of that year, GitLab hit over 1,000 contributors, 1,000 people that contributed code. Now, in September of this year, We have over 100 team members in 6 continents. It's been an amazing rise from 9 people a year and a half ago to over 100 people now. We've been able to scale as a remote-only company this far, and we want to continue being a remote-only company. Hire people wherever they are as long as they are passionate about GitLab and allow them to work from where they prefer. In this growth, we've been humbled how supportive the rest of the GitLab community has been. The praise and constructive feedback on Twitter, Hacker News, Reddit, our blog and elsewhere has been amazing. This morning we were #1 on Hacker News, and it's been just awesome to see the people having a lot of good luck with GitLab. I think the top comment was someone using GitLab and the container registry and the static pages and having a great time with it. There's so much more we can improve, but we are listening, and without you, our product wouldn't be moving along as quickly as it is. I want to reflect a bit on how far GitLab has come in the last year. This year we made amazing improvements in hosting. We now have GitLab Pages for static sites, and we have GitLab Geo that allows you to work with a remote team. Continuous integration has been getting a lot better. We now have pipelines in the product, a Docker container registry, and your GitLab runners can auto-scale to meet the demand. The interface has seen a lot of changes and improvements, and the highlight has been last month when we released the issue board, so you can plan your issues by dragging and dropping. So the GitLab team is growing, the product is improving, and the community is growing. What's next? We're excited to announce we've closed our Series B round of $20 million. It's led by August Capital, with Vili Ilchev joining our board. And we're delighted that he believes in the future we'll be outlining today. I'd like to say thank you to Vili, who's joining us today for our Q&A and panel, so you'll see him later. And in the rest of the presentation, we'll outline the vision that we'll realize with this funding. There's a huge opportunity to create a development tool that changes the way developers create software. There are 18 million developers using open source software at work, but only 30% of all developers are using Git at work right now. And the use of GitLab in the enterprise is increasing tremendously. We want to help grow that number faster. The future of GitLab is supporting the modern software development lifecycle. And to do that, we'll invest heavily in product development and marketing. Most of us have read the article, "Software is Eating the World" by Mark Andreessen. Even though that essay was written 5 years ago, which is forever in development terms, it still rings true today. Development teams are getting larger and larger within organizations. There's even more need for rapid development and highly effective product teams. And we want to be the tool that modern software development teams rely on. I would like to take a moment and look at how development processes have changed over the years. In the 1970s, there was waterfall. It was extremely inflexible and rigid. And we're all glad to graduate from that. In the 1980s, it got replaced by Scrum, but some problems remained. Scrum assumes you can estimate work accurately, which is not always true. And it consumes a lot of the developer's time trying to plan and negotiate all the features. These got solved in the most part by agile development. But agile only focuses on part of the process. Downstream from agile, we got DevOps, but there are still many gatekeepers left. And it's not suitable for distributed teams. So let's look at the challenges a new process would have to solve. There are 5 major factors we think are driving the software development revolution. First of all, the customer is king. As technology advances, customer expectations grow with it. And organizations need a better software development process that can deliver faster. Development is no longer an assembly line. Developers are tasked with owning the full path completely from idea to production. And gatekeepers, such as people responsible for security, have to be part of the flow instead of blocking it. We're becoming an increasingly networked society. Conversations are happening more frequently and in more places. For example, with new chat tools like Slack and Mattermost, people no longer have the full conversation in the issue tracker. And developers are using more languages, tools, and infrastructure. So the old ways of working no longer apply when team needs to move faster. So in this brave new world, the time to market matters. The world's best companies are shipping software at an incredible pace, and businesses that can iterate more quickly than their competitors will win. So we think the most important thing is to reduce the time from idea to production. We call this cycle time. Very few teams are measuring cycle time today, and even fewer have a cycle time of days or hours. For example, a 57-minute cycle time, it's rare, but it's possible. But you need to have a compact, cross-functional and collaborative team. You need to have automated testing processes. You need to adopt infrastructure as code. You need to perform continuous delivery and deployments. You need to remove the handoffs between development and operations. We think the next step in this post-agile world is conversational development. And we think GitLab is the tool to support it. So what is conversational development? It has 5 principles. You reduce the cycle time to increase effectiveness. You monitor the process all the way from idea to production. You thread the conversations through all stages. So that means that when I deploy something, I can still find when we first started talking about this, when the first chat with the idea was there. It's all linked together. 4th, gatekeepers become part of the organization. So instead of having a hard stop at a security review, you want to involve those people in the conversation and have a small thing for them to review so they can act faster. And it should allow the rest of the organization to contribute. Inner sourcing is an awesome thing where in big companies, you allow other teams to reuse your software and to contribute to it. And we think open source have shown that that is a really effective process. So the biggest differences between large and small organizations is their cycle time. And the benefits of small organizations are now available to large ones if you reduce it. And those benefits are shipping smaller and simpler changes. That increases efficiency. It's just a single point here, but it has so many aspects. It's more in line with the expectations and the needs of stakeholders if it's smaller. It's easier to coordinate and reason about. If you do a code review of fewer lines of code, it will be higher quality. It will be easier to troubleshoot a small release. And it prevents overshooting needs and gold plating. The longer something is in progress, the more people add to it. Other advantages are number 2, frequent iterations gather more information. If you have something out there, people will give you better feedback, like we're seeing now on our issue board. 3, you're quicker to respond to market need. Someone asks for something, you can deliver it. There's a higher predictability if you're shipping smaller pieces. And last but not least, it helps with a sense of progress. And a sense of progress is what motivates people in modern organizations. So GitLab supports conversational development. We will make sure we thread your conversations from chat to issue to merge request. And we'll give you the feedback to reduce your cycle time. There are 10 steps in the modern software development lifecycle. From idea to product, developers need a tool that takes a strong, all-inclusive approach to the development process. We have a product right now for 8 out of these 10 steps. You can chat about an idea, you can create an issue, you can plan it, you can code it with an online IDE like coding, you can commit it to a repository, you can test it, you can review it, you can deploy it. But we're also going to ship with a ChatOps bot. We're using right now on a Slack bot that we're working on, and we'll have Cog from Operable later on. We'll also be shipping Cycle Analytics this month. So that's going to be released on the 22nd on GitLab 8.12. After we ship all these steps, we're not done. We want to make the integrations better. And we think we'll have many, many months and years of work to make this a comprehensive package. So in 2016 and after, we want to be the solution for conversational development. And we'll ship cycle time, we'll ship review apps, and review apps allow you to run a copy of your application with the suggested changes. So while you're reviewing the code, you can also see how the application behaves in the new state. We'll ship with Prometheus. First, for monitoring GitLab itself and all its performance indicators. But later on, we want to make sure that every app you deploy with GitLab, you can measure their things and you can monitor them. And this is essential to do advanced continuous delivery. We'll also ship better with container schedulers. We'll run on them and we'll do better on them. We'll deploy to them, we'll run CI, we'll run an IDE, we'll run review apps on container schedulers. So the best experience will be using all the components of GitLab. But we're going to make sure we integrate well with Slack, with Jira, with Jenkins, with others. We think it's great to use GitLab for everything, but we're going to make sure we have all the APIs. For example, although we have GitLab CI, we have a great commit status API for Jenkins, and we'll keep doing that. You can use what you want to use. We don't want to force you, we want to convince you. We want to do version control for everything. So one of our part-time team members is working on integrating Git LFS and Git right now. So that's getting better. We'll improve file locking, we'll have comments on images. We're improving the chatbots. The coding online IDE, we started shipping it, but we can do a better job integrating it, and we're working on that together with coding. We want to make GitLab.com and GitLab faster. So we have a team of dedicated performance specialists who are shipping a lot of improvements every month. We also want to make it easier to migrate to GitLab. So if you're now using SVN, it should be very simple to migrate to GitLab, and also do that for the other proprietary version control systems. And last but not least, we're open. So the future of GitLab is what you contribute and what our customers ask of us. So I've talked about all the things that we want to do, but there's no better way to explain it than to show it to you. We're going to see where GitLab is headed in a 10-minute demo. Part of this demo is aspirational. It doesn't work today, but we'll make it work in the future. So enjoy.
Today, we'll talk about some of the tools GitLab provides as part of the software development lifecycle to help you get from idea to production as quickly as possible. We'll start with a brand new GitLab installation and walk you through chat ops, issues, planning boards, merge requests, CI/CD, and more. The first step is to install GitLab. We provide a Docker image which makes deploying GitLab a breeze. Today, we'll make use of Red Hat's OpenShift with Kubernetes. We'll create a new project, making sure to give it a unique name. You can optionally provide a display name or description to help you organize your OpenShift projects. We can search for the GitLab template and configure it. Once we click on Create, we can go to the Overview page. Here, we can watch the image deploy. You will see GitLab, Postgres, and Redis be set up. Once deployed, we can scale the instance up or down as needed. Here we can create a new user. Once we're logged in, we can begin to create projects. When creating a new project, we have the option to create a brand new blank project or import one from another location. We can also set the visibility level. In this case, we'll set our project to be public. Just like that, our project is created. Now we'll tab over to our chat app, in this case Slack, and we can see that a new Slack channel has been created for our project. We can use this channel to help us manage aspects of our project. Say someone has a great idea for the project and they mention it on Slack. You can create an issue via the chat client and it will appear under the project's issue list in GitLab. You can see the GitLab Slack integration has created the issue and provided us with the link. If we click it, we can see more information and interact with the newly created issue. If we wanted to work on this issue right away, we could assign it to ourselves or prioritize it with the issue board. Since this is a new project, we might want to add a few new columns to our issue board to match our workflow. We'll add a to-do and a doing column to help us get started. Now we can drag our issue from the backlog into the to-do column to indicate that it should be worked on in this sprint. If we decide we want to work on it, we can drag it to the doing column, click on it, and assign it to ourselves to let the team know that we're working on it. Let's get coding. If we go back to the project, we can see that no code has been added to it just yet. However, there are some suggestions to help us get started. We're taken to an editor where we can start writing. After adding some information about our project, we can commit our changes. We can now see our newly created README file. Editing one file at a time can be great for small changes like this, but what about editing multiple files? Let's open up coding to help us with this. If you're not familiar with coding, it's a browser-based development environment. Now that we're in coding, we can see a list of files in our project as well as a terminal prompt. This terminal allows us to run command line utilities for our project, such as asset compilation or database migrations. Since we just created this project, we don't have any code yet. However, we'll use a boilerplate app to help us get started. Once we've copied it over, we can commit it to our project. Our original idea here was to create a new logo, so we can just copy our new logo over to our project. If this were a more complex problem, we could click Start Collaboration, share the link, and begin a pair programming session. Coding allows us to do more than just edit files and move images around. We can also run commands like we would on our local machine or server. Let's go ahead and install the dependencies of our app. Now we can start our app. We're using Node.js, but you can use a variety of languages and frameworks. Our site is now running on localhost according to coding, but we'll need to visit the IP address of our machine to view it in our browser. Now we can see our webpage, complete with our beautiful logo. Everything looks good, so let's go back and check in our changes. We'll make a new branch for these changes so that we're not committing them to master. We can then add our commit message and push the changes to our server. Now we can switch back to GitLab to see that it's detected a new branch. We also get an option to create a new merge request based off of the changes that we just pushed. Let's go ahead and do that. GitLab has automatically detected that this commit closes the issue that we created earlier and has autofilled the title for us. Looks good, so let's go ahead and save this. Let's go back to our merge request. Now we can see that creating this merge request has kicked off some builds for us. This CI pipeline was copied from the Kubernetes template we used. Let's dig a little deeper. We can see that our build is finished, but we can view the log of what happened. This is useful if your build fails as it allows you to see errors. Here we're building a Docker image of our app. Then we run some tests. You could put anything in these stubs as you're not limited to these steps. We then release our Docker image to the container registry with the final image. Here's an overview of our pipelines. This is the one we just looked at, but you can see here that when we pushed to master, the app was sent to our staging server as well. If we take a look at the container registry, we can see a few images that were generated from this pipeline, including this latest image that was generated from our push to the master branch. Let's go back to our merge request. We could ask another developer on the team to review this, and they could look at the change set and leave comments. They could comment on the code changes inline or leave comments on the merge request itself. Anyone involved or watching this merge request would be notified of any changes or comments made, but what if we wanted to see the code running? We can see that this app has been deployed to a review app as part of our pipeline. We can click that link to view the app in our server. Here we can see our change running live so that we can see the code we're reviewing in action. This is great for developers collaborating on a project, but also product managers, QA people, or others who may not want to look at the code but who want to see changes. Since we're happy with this change, let's go ahead and merge it into master. Once we do, we can see that it kicks off another pipeline run on the master branch. We can follow along as the jobs process. We can watch the build stage just in case any breaking changes were made that were not caught previously. This stage makes sure that the code still builds after the merge. We can watch the log of this if we want to see what actions are being performed. While we wait, we can take a look at our OpenShift web console. Here we can see that it's auto-scaled our GitLab runner up so that we can run jobs in parallel. You can see that once OpenShift scales up runners, the jobs complete faster. The tests have finished, and now it's auto-deploying to our master branch. If we look at the log, we can see it's pulled down the Docker image and pushed it out to our server. It's also used Kubernetes to update the image tag. If we look at our environments, we can see that our staging environment was updated less than a minute ago from our master branch. If we go back to merge requests, our open one is now closed. We can find it under the Merge tab. If we take a look at it now, we see that the review app is gone but has been replaced with staging. If we click on our staging app, we can see our site on our staging environment with the logo we added. Since these changes look good, let's go ahead and ship them to production. If we go back to our pipelines, we can see there's a manual action for deploy to production. We could click that to kick off a production deployment, but let's use ChatOps instead. We can go back to our chat channel and use the deploy command to deploy staging to production. The integration has kicked off a deployment to staging. If we go back to our pipelines in GitLab, we can follow along while staging is deployed to production. Had we clicked the deploy button in the interface, it would have triggered the same procedure. These are called manual actions and are configurable in the GitLab CI YAML file. While we wait, let's go back to our environments page. We can see some more details about our staging environment, such as the deploys we did previously. This is great for debugging production incidents where something has degraded or changed and you're not exactly sure why. You could use this to figure out which deploy caused it. In the event that that happens, you can even roll back deployments here. This lets you go back to the last known good version. If we go back to environments, we can see that now our production environment server shows up, and we can see that it was deployed less than a minute ago with our latest changes. Now we can take a look at our production site and see that it has our latest changes with our new logo. We went all the way from idea to production. Since the cycle of idea to production is critical, GitLab has built in a dashboard to help you track it. If you click on the Cycle Analytics tab, you can see some metrics on the overall health of the project with a breakdown of average time spent on each stage on the way from idea to production. This is great for team managers and high-level managers looking to understand their company's release cycle time, which is key to staying competitive and responding to customers. It even includes stats for the last few features that made it into production, and you can drill down into each stage to see how those features looked. We're extremely excited to roll out these features for you, and we look forward to helping you get from idea to production faster.
All right, pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool. So let's now get into the panel. And before we get on, reports suggested on Twitter that my mic was live, so we apologize for that. I'm just glad that my real personality didn't actually drip out into the internet. So we're going to get into the panel right now. Of course, we've got Sijbrandij, who is CEO and co-founder. We've got Willy Ilchev, who is partner of August Capital. Ashley Smith, who's Chief Marketing Officer at GitLab. And Jo van der Voort, who is VP of Product. So I'm going to walk through some questions. While I'm doing this, be sure to get your questions in using the GitLab Live hashtag, and then we'll get to your questions afterwards. So I want to start out with Sid. Like, a critic could suggest that building this vision could arguably turn into a big monolithic block that becomes immovable. Some people may suggest that SourceForge suffered that fate. How do you achieve this without becoming that?
Yeah, I must say it's a concern I shared. When Dimitri made GitLab CI, I was not very charmed with the whole idea. So we found that over time we can add the complexity and it makes for a better experience. So in the end, it starts and begins with the user. If it's easier, if it's more convenient to have everything in a single interface, that is what we do. And we found that as we integrate more and more in one interface, in one data store, these are steps you have to go to every time you make something new. So they better be very convenient to get to. And you don't want to be juggled around between all kinds of different tools. And when you move to another team, they have their tools set up completely differently. It doesn't make sense to me. I think the whole world can collaborate to make a great way to have all these things integrate, because these processes are complex. And I think we should collaborate with thousands of people to make a great way to do it. I'm a Ruby on Rails programmer, and I think a huge part of that is just having a great out-of-the-box experience. So I think that's the answer. We're not afraid to tackle that complexity.
And as a follow-up, people watching this will be software developers, they'll be translators, documentation writers, advocates. Is this just for pure software development, or do you see this kind of methodology, this workflow, expanding out into how people translate software, how people write documentation, things like that?
Yeah, we certainly think that version control should be for everyone. And we're seeing already with our static site that it will make it easier for people to contribute. We're the first company to launch merge request conflict resolution in the web interface. And that was because not everyone wants to have their local development environment. We want to make it easy to boot up an IDE. So we want people to contribute, but we also think, for example, GitBooks is doing a great thing about doing this for books. A site called PenFlip is based on GitLab, where they also allow authors to make it easier. And we want to learn from the best things there and apply them to GitLab.
So I want to switch over and ask the question to Joop now. How do you approach building this in a clear and consistent and cohesive product? I mean, this is a lot of moving parts that glue together in a particular way. But Joop, like, how do you do that on the product team?
So the first thing we do is we think about what is the smallest possible change that we can ship? What is the smallest iteration of this feature, of this change that we want to make to GitLab? And we try that. And we see how it works. And it's as simple as that. For instance, if we, with CI, the first thing was a simple app outside of GitLab. Then we thought, well, maybe we can integrate it. We tried it, it worked. So we continued with that. It's really as simple as that.
Got it. And moving over to Willy as well, I mean, obviously, Sid was talking earlier on about the 20 million that's been invested. I guess why? Like, why GitLab? I mean, there are multiple organizations in the world that are trying to target software engineers and to do software right. But why invest in GitLab?
Well, I wrote a blog post today that explains this, but for me, it's a function of three things. As Sid said, software is eating the root, which means that every organization, from industrial companies previously with no expertise or software capabilities, to technology companies, every company is going to have software as part of their core IP and how they differentiate in the marketplace. So I think the market for and the need for developer tools is going to only grow over time. The second thing is, I think the product. I haven't seen a company with a vision and ambition this broad and wide to really bring a full platform from idea to deployment and everything between on the same integrated platform. And finally, I think it's great companies are built on top of disruptive business models, and I think the open source business model combined with a free SaaS application to target small teams, small companies, individual developers hacking on the side, and small teams in large organizations to drive adoption of the platform, and then monetizing when enterprises want to centralize on one common software development platform. I think that is a very disruptive business model that we haven't seen before, and I'm very excited to be part of it.
Okay.
And for me, it was a no-brainer.
And Ashley, I mean, you're in the hot seat in terms of helping to communicate this out, to the world and help people to understand this. And there's a lot of, nuance in this. I mean, some people will be watching this and will just intrinsically understand it, but there'll be people in big enterprises who won't necessarily understand some of the subtleties of this. People who are maybe less familiar with inner source or open source. Like, how do you go about communicating out not just the principle of conversational development, but also the solution as well? How do you do that?
Yeah, so we're seeing that a lot of people in the enterprise are actually already doing conversational development, but just not calling that. And there's pieces, of course, that we're going to improve and continue to create a product around it. But we really just do talk to the community a lot. We're talking to everyone from your independent developer working on an app all the way to developers at Fortune 500 companies and getting their feedback, understand how this can help them, how he or she is in their day-to-day lives chatting about something, and how that can turn into an actual live idea, a live product. So it's all about having conversation with the community. It's kind of funny, conversational development is built on having conversation with the community, and we're using our own version of conversational development at GitLab creating our product, right? So we're already doing it as well. So it's all about chatting with the community, finding out what they're already doing and building the product that supports that need, and also talking to people in the enterprise who want to be doing this type of development and figuring out how we can help to make that transition more seamless.
Got to rate your own dog food. And then I guess the final question I've got, and then let's move on to everybody else's questions, is for Sid. And everybody else is obviously welcome to dip in as well. A cynic could suggest that by having lots of different pieces of software in this kind of life cycle, that you're inviting the potential for competitors to kind of come in and eat your lunch. So Slack is an example. A lot of people using Slack today. It is without question at some point in the future, Slack is going to diversify its product line and do other things. What are your thoughts on that? Like that obviously GitLab wants to succeed as a company, but this is a fairly this is building all these different pieces together that could potentially have a competitive risk. A cynic may suggest.
Yeah, I think it's very simple. The best product must win, and that's how it is with open source. The best code wins, and we want to make it very easy to be compatible with GitLab. And for example, with ChatOps, we see a big future in using Cog from Operable. We think it's amazing software. But for the first iteration, we wanted to keep it simple. So we're making a Slack bot because that's what most of our users are using. And although we think Mattermost is a great open source product, we're not afraid to integrate with external tools. So also, we're working a lot on Jira integration. We want to make sure we have all the APIs to use Jenkins with GitLab. We want to convince you to use our stuff. We don't want to force you. And we hope that we won't be afraid that if other better solutions exist, we adopt them. And an example is the GitLab runner. We used to make our own runner in Ruby. And then this guy came along, Camille was his name, and he made a much better runner with much more features in Go. And we said, that is much better. We'll make that the official one. And by the way, do you want to join the company? And now he's the lead of our CI team. So that won't always be possible, but we'll embrace better tools if they become available.
Fantastic. Well, thank you to all the panelists. Let's now move on because my questions are frankly pale in importance to everybody else. I have a small iPad here that's full of questions and also has a headphone socket, weirdly. So if you want to get old school. So if you want to get your questions in, post to Twitter with the GitLab Live hashtag. So I'm going to quickly look through this and see what we've got. All right, so I'm going to murder all of these pronunciations, everyone. Balaska C asks, Sid mentioned Git for everything. What are the plans for internationalization and localization, particularly considering non-tech people? What do you think about that?
Yeah, we think that's obviously something that has to happen. So it's going to happen at some point. Right now, we'd love for it to be driven by one customer that says, I absolutely need to have this. We're hesitant to do it because it will slow down a bit, all the development processes and the application itself. So we're looking at ways to do it in a way that is memory efficient, that is CPU efficient, and that doesn't slow down the release cycle. And when we really have the need, we'll do it. There's some alternatives to GitLab that have embraced translations and then later backed away from it. We want to prevent that. So we've been very patient. And please share your use case, and it will happen in the future. And there's a huge issue about this on the GitLab issue tracker that I'm very involved with.
So we have a question from Sonal Keshav, who asks, what is the timeline on this master plan? Like when do you expect all of this to be up and running?
So all the 10 parts, thanks for the question, by the way, all the 10 parts we want to ship before the end of the year. So we're going to ship cycle analytics this month, a Slack bot this or next month, Cog, we're looking into it. But that's not the end of it, because we want to make sure that all the parts are integrated well, and that's going to take many, many, many months and a lot of effort. So the trick is not just shipping a bunch of stuff, the trick is making it work really well together. And we've seen with CI that integrating it could happen in a month, but it took like 4 or 5 months to make it work well together. So I expect that we'll be busy with stuff like that whole of 2017.
So we have a question from Jonas Erlandson. Will these new features be part of the free accounts on GitLab.com, or will they be enterprise only?
Yeah, so on GitLab.com, you're using GitLab Enterprise Edition. So on GitLab.com, you're going to have all the features anyway. But I understand the question, will it be part of the open source version? And if you look at our stewardship, so that's on our About page under stewardship, you see that we promise that anything in our direction, so any of these 10 points will be part of the open source version. So that was the deciding factor to make cycle analytics part of the open source version. So we want to make sure that with the open source version, you can run a GitLab Forge, you can use that with 100 people very well. There's no performance penalties, no limitations, and it contains our complete direction.
So just remember, if you want to get your questions in and for the team to answer them, #GitLab Live is on Twitter is where you need to point your Twitter guns. So we have a question here from Kale, which gives me the shivers. People eat too much kale in California. Are there any plans to do a pass like Heroku?
We think Heroku has been a great innovator, and actually Vili was one of the people that helped acquiring them for Salesforce, and I think that shows he has really good taste. But Heroku's done many things right, and we want to make it very easy to deploy applications. One thing that we're introducing soon is review apps, something Heroku's been doing really well. We want to make it very easy to deploy from GitLab. So GitLab Deploy has been gotten pretty good over the years, and we want to keep enhancing that, keep making that better, keep making it a more seamless experience, and both to servers and to container schedulers.
All right, I'm going to give Sid a rest for a second. So, Yo, you're up. The question here is from Juana Sipos. What is the plan to get the other 70% of software developers using version control? How do you do that from maybe a product perspective?
That's a great question. From one perspective, of course, we see a slow move towards Git itself. So we see these larger enterprises moving by themselves to Git. What we want to do is we want to make it very easy. We understand that Git is hard in the essence, and we just want to make it very easy to use. So we designed GitLab in such a way that it's very easy to use, and for anyone, whether you're an engineer or not, it's easy to pick up.
Wonderful. And I'm going to follow up with a question from Warren Postma, who asks, and I think Warren may be a bit of a GitLab fan, I want to know how you've been able to deliver so much great new stuff so fast between 8.9 and today. Is remote first the key?
Remote first is definitely one of the keys. I would say it's our strategy of shipping small iterations, having a really incredible team, of which we're all very proud. And of course, working remote helps a lot because everyone can just work as comfortably as they are. And it forces us to work asynchronously, which helps a lot. And of course, we do everything within GitLab. And by doing that, everything is available to everyone.
Wonderful. Now, I like the tough questions, so keep them coming. Darpan Shah, we'll move this back over to Sid. Have you used Agile to develop this while saying Agile won't work in all cases?
Great, keep the tough questions
We
going.
like this.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with Agile. I love Agile, and it's the Agile Manifesto reading that was one of the defining moments in my career, and I subscribe to all of it. So I think you should see conversational development as an evolution of Agile. I don't want to compare it to Einstein, but Einstein didn't prove Newton wrong. It was an evolution. And Agile didn't prove Scrum wrong. It was an evolution. And we hope that conversational development adds to Agile instead of replaces it.
So we have a question from, let me see, there's no name attached here. So a question from the Ethos asks, are GitLab planning on developing an entire ecosystem of tools like Atlassian? What do you think about that?
I think yes, but an ecosystem is a bit like maybe a zoo or a bit disorganized. So we want to make sure that all these tools work really well together. So many of these tools will be in the same interface, and we've seen many emergent benefits you get when you do that. It's easier to use. You can have richer details in the interface. And because you have one data store, you can do things like cycle analytics. Cycle analytics wouldn't be possible if your conversations and if your progress is all over the place. You need to have one backend to support it all. And so I think that's where our strategies differ. We think that integration and convention over configuration is key to make this happen.
So William Penton asks, and I think this is a good question for Sid as well, what backlash have you received from IT when this, in essence, gets rid of them in favor of DevOps?
I don't think that we're getting rid of any people. I think what's happening is that sometimes people are masters of ceremony. Well, it's better for them to be involved with the process and the details itself. So if you are a project manager that doesn't know any of the technical details, but just organizes the stand-up and makes notes, that's not a good way to spend your career. I think it's important to not spend too much time on ceremony, but get involved in the conversation, contribute to it, and make it better. And for example, security shouldn't be a stop doing this, but they should engage and review it and give remarks to make it better. So I think that's where it's going. And I think software is expanding so fast, there's just an enormous need for people.
Yo, you're up again. Sorry. Joseph Fraser asks, will the bundled integrations use public APIs, or will they be specially privileged over external integrations?
No, they won't be especially privileged. All our APIs are publicly available, and it's always been our intent to make almost everything you can do available through the APIs so that you can develop integrations, or you can just easily integrate it with any internal tools you have, or any other tools for that matter.
Wonderful. And I'll follow up with another question to you, which is from Laurie Van Buell. How does GitLab see the role of management in relation to work done, like time management and planning? Like, is any of that factored into this?
Yeah, that's a really great question. In fact, we think, as Sid was saying before, part of conversational development is that the whole team is present in this whole loop and has access to all of this information. So we're thinking in many ways about this, one of them being, for instance, that we're planning to add time tracking to GitLab and, for instance, reports.
Wonderful. So we're going to have a few more minutes of questions. You're letting Billy and Ashley sit there without making a fool of themselves. So get your questions in about venture capital and marketing. Sid, Clement Ho asks, some cases where community wanted a feature, it was a no-go. Will there be more ways for them to push their features?
So Clement, thanks. You're an MVP of GitLab and we love you a lot. I'm not sure what examples you're talking about. Every feature is a trade-off, because every feature we add, it means it will be harder to add another feature in the future. So you have a pretty strong voice, so let's talk about the features you mentioned, because we want to give them a second look now that you're in favor of them. Of course, codes speak louder than words, and on the stewardship page, there's a couple of criteria that say when will we merge something, and one of the criteria is if you have the code ready to do it, it makes it a lot easier for us to wrap our heads around it and to see the technical impact. So that certainly helps. Repeatedly asking for it is great, just campaigning for it. So just bring it to our attention again and again, and collect bystanders and other people that subscribe to the use case. And there's many of these examples where it just takes us a while. I'm going to throw Dimitri under the bus. So Dimitri was against having public projects in GitLab. And right now the battle is raging about, do we need custom labels on issues? And I think for these things, we see the use of custom labels, but we also see the use of a clean interface and a good data structure. So how can we achieve both? And I look forward to seeing you on the issue tracker discussing these things with us.
So Ashley, Marco Kazish asks, are there plans to improve SEO for open source projects?
We have an entire team dedicated to online marketing. Mitchell is out here watching. He is focused right now on doing an SEO screen of our own website. Hopefully in the source of, or in the nature of open source, we're able to release those findings and help the open source community better improve the SEO of all the projects out there. We're also looking into ways that we can help improve the experience around hosting open source projects on GitLab. And in doing that, we'll make sure that when people are searching for your project, they'll be able to find it quite easily.
And then we have a question from Valerie for Villy, who is asking, what's it like to be an investor in the developer space?
Well, it's a really good question, because I will not, and I said this in my blog post, I will not pretend to know what the future holds for developers. Great entrepreneurs and developers will show us the way. And so I think my job is to find great leaders and great entrepreneurs who are innovating and support them. My job is not to predict the future. And I think the more time I spent with the GitLab team, the more I read, the more customers I talked to, the more developers I talked to, the more obvious it was to me that the value and the innovation that this team is delivering is unlike anything we've seen before in the space. So it's intimidating to invest in the space, but when you find amazing entrepreneurs, you can lean on them, and that's what I'm doing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for submitting your questions. Sadly, we have tons more questions, but we're out of time. Otherwise, we'd be here all day. I want to say a big thank you to Villy, Ashley, Sid, and Job, of course, for joining us today. And a big thanks to Platzi.com for putting all this together. It's been a pretty beastly amount of AV equipment and process to put all of this together. They've done a really good job. So everybody who stuck an email address into a form to sign up for this, GitLab is going to reach out to you about helping, essentially soliciting the community's opinion and moving this forward. This is just the beginning of the story. But also keep an eye on the ConDev hashtag on Twitter, where you'll be able to see what's going on. Ashley was assuring me yesterday that there's going to be a ton of material, blog posts, and all kinds of good stuff. There's going to be kind of sharing the story of this as it unfolds. So without further ado, thank you everyone for joining us, and have a good day.
Thanks, Jono.